Okay, we're looking at Stave 5, which is the final part of A Christmas Carol, and it's the bit where everything turns out very well for Scrooge and he becomes a happy person. The first thing that Dickens tells us is that the time before him was his own to make amends in. So we get straight away the idea that he realises that he can change and that he's got this opportunity to change and he's going to make the most of the opportunity, that all he wants to do is make things better. And he cries again, exactly as he did at the end of Stave 4, I will live in the past, the present and the future. So he really wants to live the teachings that he got from the spirits. He wants to take everything that they taught him and he wants to remember the impact that his past had on him. He wants to live in the present and enjoy it. And he also wants to think about the consequences for the future. Dickens uses a lot of quite interesting verbs at this point. He describes him as scrambled out of bed, sobbing, fluttered, glowing, laughing, crying, frisking. So all these words that are to do with movement and emotion, in complete contrast to the Scrooge that we met at the beginning, who didn't show any emotion and who was very hard and stone-like. He's described as glowing with his good intentions. And of course, in Stave 1, we looked at how he's almost described as not having any life in him whatsoever. He might as well be dead for all the life that's in him. So he's so radiant with the possibility and the desire to do the right thing and to make a good life for himself that he's actually glowing. You can see it physically. He uses a lot of similes to describe himself at this point, Scrooge. He says, I'm as light as a feather, I'm as happy as an angel, I'm as merry as a schoolboy, I'm as giddy as a drunken man. So Dickens uses the technique of repetition to embed this idea more firmly in the reader's mind. So the idea that he's happy as an angel, he's likening himself to something pure and good to show how much he's changed. As merry as a schoolboy, so someone who's carefree, who's got no worries in the world. Giddy as a drunken man, he's lost control and he doesn't mind. He's happy to step out of who he used to be and to let things be a little bit freer and a little bit more carefree. He also laughs, and this is made a big deal of. It says it's a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. So this is something that he doesn't do ordinarily. So suddenly he starts to laugh, and Dickens uses onomatopoeia. He writes the sound of the laugh, ha ha ha, as if it's such an unusual sound that we have to actually have it described to us. He also says, I don't know anything, I'm quite a baby, because he gets so flustered and so confused with what he's trying to do. So almost the idea that he's been reborn by this experience and that the whole of his life is ahead of him, that he is something now pure and innocent and good, and that none of the bad stuff that he did before is going to matter anymore. Sorry, that's the cat. Then he hears the sounds of the bell, and Dickens again uses onomatopoeia. He says, clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Now, it sounds weird, but why would he write it other than to explain to us that these sounds are almost as if to Scrooge they're being heard for the first time? And afterwards it says, oh, glorious, glorious. Even these sounds that he recognises and that he's heard every day of his life sound wonderful to him because the whole of the possibility of his life stretches ahead. And we'll remember from Stave 1 that Dickens was using pathetic fallacy to emphasise Scrooge's character. So the idea that when Scrooge was sad and melancholy and lonely, the weather was dark and rainy and foggy and there was nothing to be seen and you felt very enclosed. He wakes up on this day after the ghost has left him and he sees golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air. So everything is better. And we know how much being in nice weather lifts our spirits, and it's exactly the same in this book. He has to find out what day it is because he was told that he was going to be visited on 3 consecutive nights. But in actual fact, he finds out that it's Christmas Day, and it says, it's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. And it's important to him that it's Christmas Day because he's finally learnt the meaning of Christmas and he wants to have the opportunity to put that into practice. So out of the window he sees this boy and he has this grand plan that he's going to send the boy to the poulterer's to buy the prize turkey, and he's going to secretly have it delivered. And he says, I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be. So now that he's finally cracked onto the idea of humour and jokes, he just thinks like it's almost like he's invented this idea. He's so pleased with himself for coming up with this concept. He hasn't actually considered the fact that they don't even have an oven, so if they were suddenly presented with a gigantic turkey halfway through Christmas morning, they wouldn't even be able to cook it. But never mind. Again, Dickens uses the technique of repetition. He repeats the word chuckle, the chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair and chuckled till he cried. So he's repeating this idea of the chuckle so that we absolutely understand this, how so unusual. It represents such a change in Scrooge. That, you know, he never laugh at all. And now he chuckles, which is this lovely, happy, throaty laugh, and he's just having a great time. Then he goes out into the street, and remember in Stave 1, he was not really the most popular person on the streets, and everyone tried to avoid him. Eve says even blind men's dogs pulled their owners into doorways to avoid him, and no beggar ever asked him for money. And here it says, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He patted children on the head and questioned beggars. So he's become this lovely, benevolent figure who's got time for everybody and is friends with everybody. And it's completely different. He also sees one of the charity collectors who he turned down the previous day. And he... sorry, it's the cat again. And he... decides to give them some money, and it says he knew what path lay straight before him and he took it. So he realizes that the only way to make amends for having been so rude to them the day before is to give them some money, and he whispers in their ear some enormous sum, and the man says, I can't possibly take it, and he says, you must, and a great many back payments are included in it. Then he remembers that it's Christmas Day and he needs to go to a party and have something to eat, so he turns up at his nephew Fred's house. And he's a little bit anxious. It says he has to walk past the door a few times because he's a bit concerned that he won't be invited in, that he won't be welcome. And he goes in and he says to Fred, it is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? So it's quite a humble request. He's not just expecting to be welcomed. He does ask very politely whether he can come in. And then the narrator says, let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. So it's kind of like the Christmas spirit lives on in Fred, that Fred would never ever turn him down. He was always going to be welcome. And it says, wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. So again, repetition. It's a known technique of Dickens, but highlighting how happy it was. The next morning, he goes to work, and he's there and he waits for Bob Cratchit. And he's again hatched a cunning plan to frighten Bob. So he says, first of all, he tells him off for being late because he's, 16 minutes late. And Bob's terribly apologetic and says, I was making rather merry. I'm so sorry, it won't happen again. And Scrooge decides he's gonna fake being a really mean boss, and he says, now I'll tell you what, my friend, I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore, he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, and therefore, I am about to raise your salary. And Bob behaves like Scrooge has gone mad, and it suggests that he's going to reach for the poker to defend himself. He says, I'll raise your salary and endeavour to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon. Remember that he was so touched by the plight of Tiny Tim when he did the rounds on with the Ghost of Christmas Present and the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, that his first priority is to assist the struggling family. And that's kind of it, really. There's a little conclusion which tells us how well everything turned out. It says, to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. Again, repetition of the word good, just highlighting. And it says that even though people laughed to see the change in him, he didn't care. And it says his own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, so that he maintains this benevolence and this friendliness and this ability to be good to all people at all times. And the final line of the book is, and so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone, which is, of course, the message that if you change, if you want to be a good person, you can redeem your sins whilst you're still on earth. You don't have to wait until you die and you have to drag around a whole load of chains. And that's it for A Christmas Carol. So that's plot summary, key quotes, character stuff. I'll do another one on how to make sure that you ace the essay section, because there are techniques. Yeah, that's that. All right. Hope it's been good. See ya.